Good day there once again viewers, Kamikaze78 here. Today we're going to be talking about Star Wars Battlefront 2, more specifically about its reveal trailer, the good that came from that reveal trailer, and the somewhat hidden evils that have also been brought to light through that trailer. That might sound a bit odd at first, but you'll see what I mean as we get into the video in a bit more detail. But anyway, I think it's fair to say, my friends, that if you are like myself and a huge Star Wars fan, then this past weekend has been just a tad bit exciting for all of us. You see folks, not only did we get our first look at the teaser trailer for Star Wars The Last Jedi, but we also got our first look at the reveal trailer for Star Wars Battlefront 2. And to me, ladies and gentlemen, there are two things that we need to address in regards to this Battlefront reveal trailer. Firstly, and most obviously, is that it looks like EA and DICE have been listening to our feedback from the last game based on the early details that we have for the sequel. At launch, we will have space battles, we will have battles and heroes from all three eras, and we will have a more in-depth customization system for the multiplayer, which promises an experience that will feel entertaining for a much longer period of time. But that is not all. As great as all of that really is, that's not the best part, not by an absolute long shot. The best part is that it has been confirmed that there will be no Season Pass, yes, I repeat, no Season Pass for Star Wars Battlefront 2, and all I have to say to that is fuck yes, gaming community. Fuck yes for standing our ground and making a statement to these gaming companies, telling them that we won't put up with their bullshit when they try this sort of stuff. And I've really got to commend DICE, who I can only assume were the driving force for the no season pass decision, for listening to their fans and making changes accordingly. So yeah, Star Wars Battlefront 2 is already looking to be a much more promising game than the previous game was ever made out to be, and we have a lot to look forward to if the trailer and the early details corresponding with the trailer are anything to go by. However, the reveal of Star Wars Battlefront 2 has raised the issue of another rather important practice, or trend for that matter, regarding the industry that has been becoming a lot more common as of late, and is something that we as gamers need to be very aware of. That trend that I talk about is using fully released games as a tech test, or as a proof of concept, which I know sounds so far out of left field and random to the point where it might sound somewhat insane. I get that, but I urge you guys to give me a few minutes here. That is not a statement that I would make willy-nilly. There is a little bit of thought behind that. For example, when we take a look at Battlefront 2015, I think it's fairly fair to say that while the game looked great, it was really just one big tech test to see what they could accomplish with their new photogrammetry technique that they used to create all of the models in the game, and what they could do as far as gameplay went that satisfied fans of Star Wars in general and the previous series of Battlefront games that was released by Pandemic Studios, all the while trying something new. Sure, the game looked about as smoking hot as Margot Robbie's Harley Quinn, but there was still clearly a lot of confusion amongst the developer team surrounding what they should and shouldn't do from a gameplay perspective. It was a long time between the two different series of Battlefront games, which made the job of identifying how the wants and needs of the target audience changed over time even more difficult than what it is originally for game design. In game design, the hardest thing to do when you're coming up with a game is identifying a target audience and how to cater your game to that target audience and doing it well. A lot of people simply wanted a refinement and a remaster of the original games by Pandemic Studios, but the word refinement means many things to lots of different people. So just how do you go about getting a clear, concise message of feedback from your fans? It's simple, release a game and note down their feedback. But on top of that, just because things weren't interesting enough already, I would also argue that Battlefront 2015 was released intentionally with a lackluster feature list at launch to narrow the core player base's attention span onto certain aspects of the game that the developers specifically wanted feedback on. Things like very simplistic flight controls, the mechanics of the pick-upable heroes, vehicles and equipment, and changes from a class-based system to a loadout-based system were all put in the spotlight to get feedback on those elements in particular. By reducing the noise that would come from other, more secondary elements of the game, they gathered the focused feedback as ways to improve the sequel. Again, a proof of concept to see what works and what doesn't, and how to improve that based on the feedback for the sequel. The reveal of Star Wars Battlefront 2 only serves to be proof of this practice being put into play. Now, I can see it now. Many will say that Star Wars Battlefront Battlefront 2015 was a one-off occurrence, a case of the developers releasing the game too early thanks to the grip of money-hungry publishers, or that it's simply how a game series tends to work. It starts off as an idea, and the sequels continue to develop on the concepts of that idea. But this kind of practice is far from a one-off occurrence. You guys want to see another example? Well then, let's just take a good old gander over at the Titanfall franchise. Turn back the clock to a few years ago to the release of Titanfall 1. Tell me this, folks, what was the one criticism of Titanfall 1? It was simple, not enough content in the multiplayer to justify the game being entirely focused on the multiplayer itself, and the lack of a single-player story. Now, why was the first Titanfall released like this? Maybe because the developers were trying to focus the community on the game's more innovative features to get an idea as to whether the concept of parkour and asymmetrical Titan vs pilot gameplay in a first-person shooter would work. When the developers got clear feedback that the game was a good starting point, they knew that they could develop a sequel that would cater entirely to what the fans needed. They had a clear direction to follow. And look what the result of that was. Titanfall 2, a huge improvement in the series. So sadly folks, what this tells me is that games that aim to be the pilot game, if you will, the first iteration in what is planned to be a long series of games with sequels, are now tech tests or proof of concepts for the developers, a way to narrow down on how the game should be built from the point of view of the consumers. But this raises the question, shouldn't this be the role of alpha and beta tests? Why force gamers to spend $80 for what appears to be a glorified way to get feedback? Well, it's mainly because games have become more expensive to make. The gaming industry has been continuously pushing the realm of possibility with prettier graphics, beefier sounds, smoother animations through the use of motion capturing, more advanced engines, and deeper mechanics that now resemble the quality that has been set as the standard for the industry to uphold. If a game doesn't have pretty graphics, good sound, good animation, and good mechanics and engaging gameplay, then it's considered a write-off instantly. If a game sacrifices greatly on one of those aspects and doesn't make up for it in another regard, it's considered a fail instantly. But this emphasis on quality costs a lot of money, and a lot of work needs to go into a game before it actually gets to a playable alpha and beta state that allows the player base to test the game. And by this point, the core mechanics and focus of the game is already established, it's already set in stone, and so locked in to the point where it would be impossible to address any concerns that the player base has with those core mechanics. So, from a business standpoint, and I can't believe I'm about to say this, it actually makes sense to release a game with a limited feature list to see what works and what doesn't, and use that information to build a better sequel. But that really doesn't excuse it from being shifty, shady, and a really hurtful practice that just hurts the trust and wallets of the consumers. An $80 tech test is something that would have been considered blasphemy 10 years ago, but back then, games were still a heck of a lot cheaper to make, and the industry was nowhere as big as it is today. So now, where do we find ourselves? Well, if I'm honest guys, I think we find ourselves on the very thin blade of a double-edged sword. Is the concept of tech tests disguised as full games the way into the future? Personally, I fucking hope not. Because, well, it's not like the trust between player and dev was important or anything. How do we know what a full game is and isn't? But yeah, whatever. Who knows? That might very well be just my very short-sighted way of looking at the situation. Maybe it's for the better right now. I just don't see that, and I personally do have grave concerns about this practice becoming a driving force in the industry. But anyway guys, that's enough rambling from me. Time for you guys to start leaving your comments and thoughts on today's topic in the comments section down below. I'd love to hear what you all have to say guys. If you enjoyed today's video, then a backhanding of that like button would be greatly appreciated, and if you find yourself backhanding that like button for any reason really, and you're new to the channel, why don't you earn a backhand the subscribe button whilst you're at it to keep up to date with the content in which I am releasing here on my channel. As per always guys, I hope you enjoyed today's video. Peace out, and I'll be seeing you all next time. Have a good one.